We saw previously in working with conditional structures that we might have a conditional structure inside the fork of another conditional structure. We refer to those as nested conditionals or nested structures. We can also have nested repetition structures where we have a loop inside another loop. In this example in the flowchart, we have an outer loop, which is our first loop, and we have some process we do if it's true. And within that process, we may have another loop where we're checking another Boolean expression, and if that's true, we're going to do a nested process. And we'll repeat that nested process as long as that Boolean expression is true. Once it's false, we exit that inner loop and come back to the outer loop and check to see if that is still true. And if that's true, we repeat that process until finally both of those are false. We might write this in Visual Basic using do whiles. So do while our first Boolean expression, as long as that's true, we're going to do something, and then we're going to check a second Boolean expression, and if that is true, we're going to do something and keep looping that inner loop. And so we repeat that second do something multiple times until the second Boolean expression is false. Then we're hitting the loop for the outer repetition and repeating that do while Boolean 1 as long as that's true, and repeating the whole process until finally both of those are false and we exit. Now, whether we use a do while, a do until, a for next, a for each loop, it doesn't matter. We can always have any type of nested repetition structures together. So here we have a do while loop for our outer loop, but the inner loop is a for next. Here is a for next inside another for next. We'll have a project coming up where we create a multiplication table. We'll use this concept of the nested for next structures to accomplish creating that table. You're going to find as in your programming career that you're going to use nested repetition structures a lot, especially as we work with data. We'll be reading in data files down the road that will consist of records. That might be our outer loop, and in those records are fields that would be processed with our inner loop. We haven't gotten to data records yet, so let me show you an example of using this concept to create our GUI interface programmatically to save ourselves some time. And that's particularly useful when we have something being repeated, as you'll see in a moment. Let's consider that we want to create a chess application or a chess simulation of some sort. And obviously we need a chessboard. And so I have here 64 labels, and using chess notation of each column being A through H and each row being 1 through 8, with the A1 being in the bottom left-hand corner and the H8 being in the upper right-hand corner. I want to show the chessboard with its alternating black and white squares, and the label of each square being the chess notation, A1 through H8. Now I can create this using creating one label and then copying and pasting and moving it and creating the other 63. And I have to change the text of each label and change the name of each label and change the back color of labels and maybe the fore color of labels. And that can be a fairly time-consuming process. I also want it so that when the user clicks on a label, it shows them which square they clicked. So you clicked square E6. On this one, you clicked square F3. Here is A4 and H6. Well, let's take a look at this project. And here's my interface. Wait, what? Yes, this is my interface. The only thing I have is a form. I changed the size of the form and I changed the text of the form to control the title on the form. And then I double-clicked on the form to create a form load. I want something to happen as soon as this project is loaded. And what I want to have happen is for it to create the chessboard. I don't want to take the time to create all 64 squares and change the text and change the colors and so forth. I'm going to do it programmatically. And as you can see here, there's not a whole lot of code to do that. So here is my form 1 load. I'm going to create a variable of left margin and top margin. That's how much space I want on the left side and the top of my chessboard. And then I want to set the width of each label and the height to be the same. I want them to be square. So I set the height equal to the width. I use 60. Could have used 50, could have used 100. Obviously my form size would need to change based on the size of each square of the chessboard. Now, here's the beauty of this in using nested repetition structures. Remember, we want our rows to be numbered 1 through 8, but with 8 at the top. I'm going to create this from the top down. So I have a loop of for I as integer equals 8 to 1, step minus 1. So we're going to go from 8 to 7 to 6 to 5 down to 1. Then inside that loop is another loop, another for loop using j as my counter. And there I'm going to go from 1 to 8. Now I want my columns to be lettered A through H. Within that inner for loop, I'm going to create a new label. And then I'm going to set its name equal to LBL and the character of the ASCII value of j plus 64. Now j is going to start as 1. 1 plus 64 is 65. That's a capital A. Second time through the loop, j will be 2. 2 plus 64 is a capital B. So I'm going to get A through H as I iterate through each time of this loop. I'm also going to concatenate to that the value of I. So I'm going to get, in the first iteration of my I loop, I'm going to get LBL A8, LBL B8, LBL C8, and so forth through LBL H8 will be the names. Now I'm going to set the width of that new label to the width and the height to the height. The location of that label is going to be the left value, left property, equal to left margin plus j minus 1. The j is starting out as 1, so 1 minus 1 is 0. So this is the first square on the left side is just going to be spaced from the left margin. But the second time through that loop, where j is 2, 2 minus 1 is 1, 1 times 60, or my width, plus the left margin is going to move it over to the right. And all of within this loop then, this inner loop of j, it's going to create the whole row of squares. And the top of those squares being the top margin plus 8 minus I. Well, if we're starting with 8, 8 minus 8 is 0 times the height. We're going to get the top margin. But then the second row would be 8 minus 7, or 1, times the height. And it's going to make that row just below the first row on the second iteration. I want to set the text. I'm going to set the text equal to the lowercase letter, which is traditional in chess notation. So CHR J plus 96. That first time it's going to be a 97. That's the lowercase a. When j is 2, it's going to be a 98. That's the lowercase b, and so forth. So we're setting the text to each square. And then I want to align that text in the center of the square. So I use content alignment dot middle center. I'm going to give it a border style of fixed single. Set the back color equal to either color or white depending on the value of j and I. So I used a ternary expression here. If j plus I mod 2 equals 0, meaning that's even, then we're going to set it to black, otherwise it's white. And I'm going to do the for color just the opposite. It'll be white and black. Now this will give me the alternating squares of black and white with either white text or black text. And then I want to add a handler to this so that when I click each square, it's going to show me which square I clicked. There is an add handler statement in Visual Basic. We can specify the control we want with the event, so new label.click. And then I can specify a procedure that's already been written, an event handler that's already been written using address of. So I wrote a procedure called show clicked. Sender as object, E as event args, message box, you clicked square, and I'm going to get the sender name to substring, starting with character 3. That's going to get rid of that LBL, the name. It's going to show me A8 or D6, whatever the square letter is. And so I can use an existing event handler using address of. However, if you wanted to create a unique event handler for this particular item, I got another one here commented out. So we can use add handler in our event that we want to handle, and then I can actually add the sub procedure here as my second argument, and that will work just as fine as well as this. But in the first example here, we're going to create one event handler that processes 64 different controls. With the second example, I believe we would create one event handler for every control. Not that that's unwieldy, but I think it's better to have them share the method that we want to employ. Now, so I've created my new label, but it doesn't yet exist on the form. I need to say me.controls add, and I'm going to add new label. And that will add that label into the controls item collection of my form and display it on the form. So once again, let me run this, and there is my interface, and I can click on a square and be told which square I clicked because they are sharing that show clicked event handler. I think you'll admit that doing it programmatically in this case can be a huge time savings. Let's say we're creating a Minesweeper game that maybe has 300 squares. Well, I'd have to create that graphically in the user interface. I'd want to do that programmatically as we did here. Lots of ways to use nested structures. I think this is kind of a fun example and shows how you can save some time doing things in code. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the Programming Practicum playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos I create, you can click my picture in the top right to subscribe to the channel.